It came down to this. If I had not been arrested by the Turkish police, I would have been arrested by the Greek police. I had no choice but to do as this man Harper told me. He was entirely responsible for what happened to me. Hello and welcome to ELLROY Reads. This is the show where every week I look at a book that was influential and profound in the life of James Ellroy, a book that has inspired him, moved him, thrilled him, amused him. And this week's book is The Light of Day by Eric Ambler, and that was the opening lines I was just reading to you. Now, Eric Ambler is a British author. He was the son of musical entertainers and puppeteers, and entertainment had a profound effect on his upbringing and what he would go on to be. Because his nominal job was working as an advertising copywriter, but he found fame as a spy writer and a writer of books of international intrigue. He burst onto the scene in the late 30s, early 40s, and wrote classic spy novels like The Mask of Demetrios and Journey into Fear, both of which were filmed. And the key themes of his work is that his lead protagonists aren't usually spies. They are innocent men, or actually, they're not always that innocent, but normal people, relatively normal people, sort of people you meet on the streets or in your everyday life, who somehow get embroiled in international intrigue. And when he began, his stomping ground was Europe between the wars, where all of these fascist states were rising, or states were kind of toppling between democracy and fascism, with a little dash of authoritarianism in between. And Ambler's own views was that he was pretty much a communist, as he calls it in his rather evasive memoirs, a fellow traveler. And he latched onto communism as he thought it was the safest bulwark against the rise of fascism and the rise of Nazism in Europe. And subsequently, he became disillusioned with communism with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Hitler and Stalin, that they would not attack each other. Naturally, Hitler broke that pact with Operation Barbarossa and the invasion of Russia, which ultimately led, with many factors, towards Germany's defeat in World War II. But that was the end of Ambler and communism. And after the war, he continued to write successful thrillers. One novel, Judgment at Delchev, published in 1951, was his most strongly anti-communist novel. He'd really turned against communism at this point, because in his early novels, the communists, the Soviet spies, were often like allies of the lead protagonist. So the lead protagonist was often a guy, because he's not used to the trademarks of intelligence work. He has to use his wits, he has to learn quickly, and he's usually completely out of his depth. But by a combination of luck, guile, and cunning, by the end of the novel, bit by bit, he works things to his advantage, and he survives and he triumphs. And in the early novels, the Soviet agents are often allies that portray sympathetically. But Judgment at Delchev changed all that. And believe it or not, the British left was still powerful and numerous enough that they treated him as an outcast. They treated Eric Ambler as an outcast from that moment onwards. And he was never really the same again with them. And he became, I wouldn't say he became, aggressively right wing or anything like that, anything that has kind of negative connotations. But he did, become much more of an establishment man, much more of a conservative looking man, and he lived for many years as a tax exile in Switzerland, and he worked in Hollywood as a screenwriter. And speaking of right wing, I think he even looks a little bit like Nigel Farage. Sorry, Eric, but that's the first thing I thought when when I picked up this novel and saw your offer photograph. So his output after the war was a bit mixed. I'm looking at The Light of Day because this to me is his late career masterpiece. And actually, I believe it is his final masterpiece. I just think that some of his novels after this, when you get into the 70s, his last novel was 1980. He lived to a ripe old age, he lived to be 89 years old. But once you get to the 1970s, they're thrillers without frills. I don't know. I think it becomes slightly of an old man writer, and the prose gets a bit stodgy, and there's a lack of action, and there's kind of a lack of intrigue. But The Light of Day is really, really good. And that opening line is we first person narration of Spencer, who is a con man living in Athens. He's engaging in small time rip-offs, cons, and he gets involved in a bad one, of ripping off tourists, and then he kind of gets embroiled at driving a car across the Greek-Turkish border, and the Turkish police stop him, and he's looking at a long stint in a Turkish prison, which is not very appealing to him. So the Turkish police cut a deal with him, and they say, okay, well, we want you to go in deeper undercover into this gang you've got embroiled with, and now you're working for us. And the whole thing culminates in that the gang he's involved with are launching this daring jewelry heist on the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, and it leads to an absolutely fantastic climax. And it's basically got everything that in his dotage that began to leave Ambler. It's got suspense, it's got excitement, and a lot of his themes, a lot of his classic themes. So the opening line there, where Spencer's talking about being in Greece and going into Turkey and being approached by an American man in Greece. One of his themes is statelessness, which is a literal legal statelessness, i.e., there's no nation state that's going to protect you. You don't have a citizenship of any country, and of course this is still an issue today. In fact, a lot of Ambler's work feels very prescient today because we have a refugee crisis in North Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere, and we have these people who don't have a home. And in Ambler's writing, these people are predominantly actually usually European, because of that kind of 1930s ground where the borders of Europe are in a constant state of flux as governments fell and monarchies fell and empires would come and go. Ambler really tapped into that, and it's a theme that's still pertinent today, even though that the politics have changed. But statelessness and identity are still a big issue. And James Ellroy, I know, recently reread these novels. He read them years ago, and he regards Ambler as one of his top writers. And he said Ellroy tends to like British writers. He's a bit of an Anglophile, so he's got a penchant for all things British. But he really likes Ambler's themes of coming up to a border, being at a border crossing, that sense of alienness, the sense of not belonging, the sense of fear that you have as you're stepping into the unknown. The innocent man who is walking into a situation into which he doesn't belong, in which he feels really out of his depth. And Ellroy's been quite honest. He says, I have felt this all of the time, and I must admit that I maybe it's a universal thing, or maybe I'm just very, very like Ellroy. Maybe, well, I am his biographer, so, but I've often felt that either abroad or sometimes at home, or even in going sometimes in a university academic setting when I've been surrounded by professors, or I mean, really, once you get to know academics, you realize how insecure they are. You then realize they're looking up to you. But I think like Ambler really taps into this source, and Ellroy, loves him for this. So The Light of Day was Ambler's late career masterpiece. 1962, it won the Edgar Award for Best Novel, which is still a big thing because I won the Edgar Award just this May for my biography of James Ellroy. And we had splendid thriller writers and spy writers. The Peacock and Sparrow won the Edgar Award, but there was this slight snottiness in crime writing circles towards the thrillers and towards the spy novels. So for Ambler to have won this back in 1962 is a major thing. And it was also adapted into the most successful film of any of Eric Ambler's novels, Top Copy. Has an all-star cast: Peter Ustinov, who won an Oscar, Spencer, Maximilian Schell, Melina McCurry. But it's a great film. It's just a romp, though. It is a caper. The themes are very much lightened, just to make it a kind of a breezy film, which is all good. I'd say go back to the source, go back to Eric Ambler, and you can't go wrong. He's a really really good novelist, absolute one of his best, and really from his beginnings in late 30s right through to 1962, and a couple afterwards. 1970s, maybe avoid novels like Dr. Frigo, just stay clear from the dull. Samina Rose is dull. But he really wrote some classic thrillers, and they're there for you to enjoy the light of day. And maybe, like Ellroy, you will feel that sense of statelessness, that sense of not belonging, but more importantly, the characters who triumph above it, and that's something that we all can take some pleasure from. Okay, thank you very much for watching ELLROY Reads. I'll be back soon with another episode. Okay, bye bye.